when Iraq ruled the world. It was in early August, and the brutal Iraqi leader found himself on a campaign of aggression. For long years, he had coveted a southern neighbor's land. He was interested in certain rich resources that neighbor possessed. Having been seasoned in war, the army was ready, so the campaign was quick and effective. And this Iraqi leader led his armies across the border and claimed the land as his own. He carried off its rich resources and took hostages back to his home and his capital. By the middle of August, the deed was done, and the nation was his. You know this story, don't you? Or do you? The year is not 1990, but 605 BC. The place, not Kuwait, but the land of Judah with its capital at Jerusalem. The conqueror, not Saddam Hussein, but Nebuchadnezzar, son of Nabopolassar, the first king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Who was this man, Nebuchadnezzar? He was the second king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Now the word Neo means new, of course, right? And so, due to the fact that we say there is a new Babylonian Empire, you would guess that there is a old Babylonian Empire. And the old Babylonian Empire reached its culmination, its height, during the time of a ruler named Hammurabi. Remember his law code? He reigned from about 1728 to 1626 BC. Following the old Babylonian Empire would be the Hittites, the Kassites, the Elamites, the Assyrians, and then finally a ruling group from upper Mesopotamia, the area called Chaldea, gained control and power. And its first king, Nabopolassar, was Nebuchadnezzar's father. He was a horribly powerful and oppressive king who destroyed the Assyrians and took on the power of Mesopotamia. But Nebuchadnezzar is the one who would really bring the kingdom into prominence. His kingdom is centered here, you can see on the picture up here, between the Tigris and Euphrates River. The capital city was named Babylon. Now the word Mesopotamia is interesting because it's from two Greek words, meso meaning between, and potamos meaning river. So Mesopotamia is the land between the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. What is today modern-day Iraq. What we know about Nebuchadnezzar comes from two sources. Primarily, we have hundreds of cuneiform tablets that we have found at his royal city, Babylon. And so we know a lot about his history, a lot about his reign from those cuneiform tablets. But he's also spoken of in the Bible almost 100 times. In both cuneiform sources and the biblical sources, he is revealed to be a proud and cruel conqueror of lands. His exploits are chronicled. We can read about them. But perhaps one of his greatest achievements was the city he built, the ancient city of Babylon. The prophet Daniel in the Bible quotes Nebuchadnezzar as having said this about Babylon. Daniel chapter 4, verse 30. Nebuchadnezzar says, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" He was a proud man. Indeed, he had built a splendid palace. The city of Babylon was starting to be excavated in about 1899. The chief excavator was a guy named Robert Coldaway, and he dug 18 years there. They uncovered a city of some 3,000 acres, a very, very large city. The walls around the city of Babylon were 13 miles long, and there were 8 gates entering the city. The most impressive is what's called the Ishtar Gate. You can see a picture of it here on the screen. It has been reconstructed at the Pergamum Museum in Berlin, and it is an absolutely fascinating thing to see. Inside the Ishtar Gate, entering the city of Babylon, one would walk down a street called the Processional Way. And here there are tiles covered with lions and an Arioch, which is kind of like an ancient ram. And also these fascinating pictures of the dragon of Bel-Marduk. Bel-Marduk was the god of Babylon. And these fascinating pictures of him, his name is Mashushu. And so he is the cohort of Bel-Marduk. It's fascinating to know that down the streets of Babylon, through the Ishtar Gate, and past these actual figures, these glazed bricks, Daniel and his friends walked. Daniel saw these. I think that makes them very special. Coldaway also found another structure near the Ishtar Gate. It had 14 vaulted chambers, and he identifies these as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Herodotus, that Greek historian we've talked about a couple times, describes the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. They're one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And Coldaway found vaulted chambers and massive arches which were used to form the base of this structure. The gardens were laid out in various levels on elevated terraces, and it's estimated that they were 75 feet tall. Now, the area around there is very, very flat, and so this must have been a very impressive landmark, beautiful landmark up in the sky. It's said that Nebuchadnezzar built the Hanging Gardens for his wife Amytas, who was homesick for the mountains where she had been raised and the vegetation. So he built this Hanging Gardens of Babylon for her. Nebuchadnezzar also built a temple to his god Marduk. It's called Esiglia. Nebuchadnezzar claims credit for it in a number of cuneiform tablets, but probably actually what he did was he rebuilt it. Probably his father Nabopolassar had started it, maybe even before that, and then Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt it. And so he claims a lot of credit for having rebuilt this this temple. And everywhere his pet dragon, Mashushu, is pictured. Now, he's a fascinating beast. He is a composite beast. He has the head of a snake, the 4 paws of a lion, the hindquarters of an eagle, the horns of a bull, and a human royal beard. Quite a guy. It actually reminds you of a number of the composite beasts that you also find in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, chapter 8. You have some interesting parallels there. Now, a few years ago, there were some stories going around that some stupendous finds had been made at Babylon. It was going around that they'd found Daniel's lion's den. It was also going around that they'd found the fiery furnace. The origin of these stories was traced down by one of my heroes, a guy named Siegfried Horn, who reports in his book, The Spade Confirms the Book, how these stories got started. His source is Coldaway's assistant, Walter Andre, who tells that when Coldaway would take groups around on tours of Babylon, that he would often tell them stories. And he especially liked to when he had a group of Bible-toting, hymn-singing, pious pilgrims. He would play a practical joke on them. Quoting from Siegfried Horn's book, he says, Coldaway guided them through the ruins and showed them a mound of brick dross as the place of the fiery furnace, a deep dig or excavation as the lion's den of Daniel, and the throne room where the Mene Tekel had appeared on the wall. There lay one of the millions of brick fragments with the stamp of Nebuchadnezzar, There were none of Belshazzar, and the believers jumped on it. Koldewey told them that they had found a piece of the handwriting on the wall. Koldewey took the piece home and denied their request to keep it. He could, he said, by no means give up such an extremely valuable find. They would just have to be satisfied with the joy of having discovered it. When he was reproached later on for having taken in these poor people, he replied in all seriousness, what? Blessed is the one who believes. Should I take away from them their joy and discourage them? This will have been their greatest experience as long as they live. Now you know the origin of those stories. Much of the city of Babylon was built with mud bricks, kiln-baked or sun-baked and dried, because there are no natural deposits of stone nearby. Thousands of them are stamped with the name of Nebuchadnezzar. As a matter of fact, if you want to see a partial brick from Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar's name on it, in the foyer there, with the artifact display, I have it in one of those cases with an arrow pointing down to show you where it is. It's also fascinating that in recent history, Saddam Hussein styled himself to be a modern-day Nebuchadnezzar. You can see from these pictures in his palaces, these fascinating pictures where he presents himself as a neo-Nebuchadnezzar, his own image here portrayed, superimposed on an ancient picture of Nebuchadnezzar. And then this other fascinating picture where you see Nebuchadnezzar in a chariot. It looks almost like an Egyptian chariot, and he's fighting with helicopters and tanks and everything coming out in front of him. Neo-Nebuchadnezzar, hardly. Saddam Hussein rebuilt on the ancient ruins of Babylon a kind of palace for himself. And every 6 feet he put in a brick that says, the Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar was reconstructed in the era of Saddam Hussein. It is the ancient Iraqi leader, Nebuchadnezzar.